Welcome everyone to News 21, where we unmask the truth. Let's talk about Africa, the continent that was once seen by Europe as the heart of darkness and primitivity. Decades have passed since colonization, but the continent still remains ignored. It mostly makes news for its conflicts, poverty, crime, and autocrats. For a long time, the world saw Africa as a lost cause until one country saw opportunity and thus began a new race for Africa, not very different from the scramble of the 19th century when colonial Britain and France wanted raw materials, slaves, and geopolitical influence. Now in the 21st century, global powers are more or less in that same race. China, the United States, France, Russia, India, the European Union, Japan, Israel, and Canada are all in the race for Africa, but one country seems to be emerging as the clear winner. China. Africa is a continent of 54 sovereign states, 17% of the world's population, 9.6% of the global oil output, 90% of the world's platinum supply, 90% of the world's cobalt, half of the world's gold supply, 2/3 of the world's manganese, 35% of the world's uranium, 75% of the world's coltan, and 54 votes in the United Nations General Assembly. All these have made Africa so attractive, and it's been transformed into a battleground for global powers. There are numerous front lines such as investment and infrastructure, military power, diplomacy, trade, and geopolitics, with every country having its domain of interest. Israel began its scramble for the continent in 2016 when Benjamin Netanyahu became the first Israeli prime minister to visit Africa in over 50 years. Benjamin claimed that Africa and Israel shared a similar history, but in reality, Netanyahu was on a quest for Africa's votes at the UN General Assembly in favor of Israel and against Palestine. Israel went on to sponsor solar energy, water, and agricultural technology. In the same year, Senegal co-sponsored a UN resolution in condemning the construction of illegal Jewish settlements on the West Bank, and in response, Israel cancelled the Mashav drip irrigation project in Senegal, sponsored by Israel, which was largely promoted as a major part of Israel's contribution in fighting poverty in Africa. Israel not only used opportunities like these to punish Africa when they failed to support them in international forums, but they also used this new relationship to turn Africa into a new market for its weapons and counter-terrorism technology, the same weapons used to suppress Palestine in its ongoing struggle for freedom. They've signed military corporations with dozens of African countries not only to train servicemen but to supply arms and ammunition to countries like Chad, Cameroon, Niger, Mali, and Nigeria, among others. In all these, Israel continues to champion the same racist and colonial mindset that enslaved and subjugated Africans for hundreds of years. Russia's interest in Africa was triggered by Moscow's isolation following its annexation of Crimea. It has used Africa to expand its geopolitical influence and limit the influence of its rivals by expanding its power projections. It's maintained a dominant presence in Libya, the Central African Republic, Sudan, Madagascar, Mozambique, and Mali. Russia enters states of interest by either building new relations, striking military deals, or grooming a new generation of leaders and undercover agents. Russia makes over $20 billion annually from its trade with Africa through exports of weapons, mercenaries, and grains. In return, it gets gold, diamonds, cobalt, oil contracts, and Africa's vote at the UN General Assembly in its favor. Russia is now the leading exporter of arms to Africa, supplying over 49% of the continent's weapons. The European Union, on the other hand, has pledged more than $54 billion in sustainable investment for Africa. In exchange, the EU wants access to the African market of 1.4 billion people, which is expected to double by 2050. Brussels has negotiated a free trade agreement with at least 40 African countries, which certainly isn't a balanced two-way trade. No country has a bigger interest in Africa than China. China is funding 2 in every 5 infrastructural projects on the continent, and it is building every third of them. Africa has minerals and infrastructural deficits while China has access and a signed checkbook. Since 2005, China has invested at least $2 trillion in Africa. It has built roads, schools, dams, seaports, stadiums, and railway lines amongst other things. China has built over 6,200 kilometers of railways, including the continent's longest railway line connecting Ethiopia and Djibouti. To gain more ground, it built the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa, and in return, it gets a lot. China is selling its culture, its currency, and even worse, its language. In Guinea-Bissau, for example, exit signs are written in Mandarin. In South Africa, China has opened 13 Chinese units within the South African police force. In 2017, China built its first overseas military base at the Horn of Africa, Djibouti to be precise, which connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Indian Ocean via the Suez Canal. The base has the capacity to accommodate 10,000 troops. It also deployed 7,000 troops to South Sudan with quote and unquote hopes of bringing peace to the world's newest nation, but most importantly was to preserve its massive energy security interest. She also gets a market to dump its low-quality goods. It has become Africa's largest trading partner with at least 10,000 Chinese firms operating in Africa according to a McKinsey study. A third of Chinese investments in Africa are in the mining sector, and finally, it gets to debt-trap Africa. Despite all its large-scale investments, China is still not Africa's biggest investor. The US is. The US accounts for more than $54 billion of FDI stock in Africa. More than 600 American companies are operating in South Africa alone, even after former President Donald Trump called Africa a shithole country. For a long time, Africa was nothing but a war zone for Washington and a place for counter-terrorism operations. Reason why it has more than 7,000 troops deployed across 17 African countries. This ideology, however, has changed, and for the US, Africa has become a new frontline to take on Russia and China, and it is now fighting it out for power and influence. Despite the presence of other world powers, China has maintained a top position in the race by using its loans to seal its position. If in the 1900s Africa was colonized with force, then in 2022, it is being trapped by debts. China accounts for 14% of sub-Saharan debts. In Angola, the volume of Chinese debt stands at $21.5 billion, Ethiopia, $13.7 billion, Kenya, $9.8 billion, Congo, $7.42, Zambia, $6.38 billion, and Cameroon $5.57 billion, making a total of $140 billion of Chinese loans. And Sri Lanka can best tell what happens when you fail to repay Chinese loans. China is clearly looking to capture Africa with its strong diaspora and huge spending. If in the 19th century the rivalry between Britain and France fueled Africa's colonization, then in the 21st century the trade war between the US, Russia, and China will do the same. Just like in the 19th century there are numerous countries in the scramble for Africa, and just like in the 19th century, Africa still gains nothing from it. Share your thoughts in the comments section, and please don't forget to subscribe as a way of supporting us. Thanks for watching.